Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the view from the opposition. This week it comes from Stephen Killen from the Liverpool Echo. Liverpool, of course, the visitors to St James's Park this weekend in a game which over the last couple of seasons seems to have grown into a bit of a rivalry. I'm your host, Andrew Musgrove, and in this episode we'll discuss that intriguing relationship between the two clubs, especially those on the touchline, the future of Mo Salah and the impact it could have this Sunday, as well as getting insight into how Liverpool will approach the game. This is the Everything is Black and White podcast. Let's get on with the show. Stephen, thanks for joining us. How are you keeping? You doing well?
Good, yeah. Sort of licking up the wounds from last season, but there's a cause for optimism. I think Liverpool have sort of started brightly, but there's still very much creases to be ironed out. How are you feeling going into the season?
Yeah, Champions League football. There's a lot to be optimistic about, a lot to be positive about. There's just a good feeling on Tyneside in general about the future of Newcastle United. It's nice just to have a bit of ambition, a bit of hope within the club. I think that's what the main difference is, that fans now can see that the other owners that actually want to achieve something at Newcastle, whereas before it was a bit about just existing, and the club barely even did that. And of course, last season, I think came out of the blue. No one expected top four football, but it's here. Champions League is going to be here next month, and there's just a real excitement. And the other really nice thing is that you now welcome sides like Liverpool to St James's Park, and you aren't fearing them. And I think that's a massive, massive difference. And yeah, Sunday, I think, is going to be a really interesting one. I think we've got to start, though, with the big news of the week. And that's the reported interest in Mo Salah from the Saudi Pro League club Al Hilal. Now, Klopp's spoken this morning. I think Salah's agent's been on Twitter or X as well and said Salah's committed to Liverpool. But it's fair to say, Stephen, that this isn't the speculation that you'd want ahead of a big game like you've got on Sunday.
No, I don't think any speculation from your best players is always worrying. Maybe the Saudi link sort of had a bit more difficulty with it. I think that Liverpool fans are more than aware of how important Mo Salah is, and I think especially losing Henderson and Fabinho, which I think going into the season we sort of expected to lose one, but losing both to Saudi Arabia, I think, knowing how much of a financial powerhouse the kingdom is, I think Liverpool fans are quietly concerned. But I think the face of it, especially with Jurgen Klopp's very stoic and firm stance on it, I think it's not going anywhere. But I think going into it, you're pondering whether he's going to be firing on all cylinders, because he has had a bit of vigor this season, and I think hopefully it shines on Sunday, and I think it maybe adds a bit more spice to the occasion, given the Saudi Arabia and Newcastle links now as well.
I think a lot of people saw Salah's reaction when he was subbed in one of the Liverpool's previous games this season. Looking from the outside in, you might make the judgment that all is not happy there, so therefore this link of him leaving maybe carries a bit more weight. But from someone who covers the club, is Salah happy at Liverpool, and you think when that window closes, he'll still be a Liverpool player?
Oh, very much so. I think that the consensus is we need this window to shut soon, and we need the Saudi Arabian window to slam shut as well. But I think with the Salah reaction, it's one of them things. The general point was, if your star player is getting subbed off and he's happy about it, then you're going to be asking questions. So I think it's a double-edged sword. But I think it's you want a reaction from a star player. I think from the interview Salah's gave, he's very much focused on breaking records. He's obviously got as many as he can with Liverpool at the minute. I think the firm focus for him is breaking even more. Only last week with his goal, he overtook Steven Gerrard, and obviously him and Gerrard have got that relationship. But you never know with football, do you? But I think maybe the outside looking in, the perception is he's unhappy. But I don't think that's the case at all.
And it's interesting you mentioned the exits of Henderson and Fabinho. We know Klopp was one of the big critics of the Saudi-backed takeover of Newcastle United, and a lot of Newcastle United fans point out that he's complained about Newcastle being taken over, but when the money from the kingdom comes knocking to buy, shall we say, the aging players of Liverpool's squad. I mean, they still have big parts to play. Henderson's still a fantastic player despite his age, but Liverpool not too quick to turn that money down. And I think that does maybe rankle at a few Newcastle United supporters when they saw the really heavy criticism initially from Klopp and others when it came to the Saudi takeover?
It's a difficult one. Obviously, it's hard to sort of speak on behalf of people, but I think with the money that's came in for Liverpool's players, you can't turn it down. And I can understand the frustrations and maybe the disgruntlement of Newcastle fans when Liverpool freely accepted, but the general consensus from Klopp has been from the start of all is that if Liverpool have players who don't want to be there, he's not going to put his foot as a wedge to the door. He's going to say, off you go. And I think maybe this season that might come to bite Liverpool back. But if the players want to go, I think for any club, given the strong position Liverpool have been in recent seasons, you can't really deter them, and especially when you're trying to keep the squad harmony together, that you can't say no.
And I mean, one of the other comments Klopp made, which is kind of stuck with him and Newcastle United fans still a little bit up about it, was his comments about ceilings. Now, there's only a few clubs who don't have ceilings when it comes to financial spending. He made those comments, and this summer Liverpool have spent quite a bit of cash. There seems to have been some kind of sort of change of guard with respect to those who have gone out, like Henderson, and those who have come in. How much of a rebuilding job is underway at Liverpool? And the fact that it is a bit of a rebuilding job, does that mean it'll take time for it to all come together? And therefore, these early games, i.e. the one on Sunday against Newcastle, it means the likes of Newcastle can maybe exploit that.
I think going into the summer, a rebuild was very much the firm focus anyway, because we had three free agents leaving the club, but Liverpool's midfield was clear and obvious that it very much was difficult to sort of manage last season. And I just think it was always on the horizon that Liverpool needed to refresh that midfield, and the squad sort of coming to that point now. We've seen it last season and the season before, I think, with the slight change of guard up front, where you see Firmino now gone and Mane's gone as well. But I think Liverpool's rebuild very much is underway, and you've seen the sort of dysfunctional patch-up job that's been the midfield, and you've seen the fact that Liverpool started fast against Chelsea and sort of fell away a bit in the last stage of the first half and in the second half in general. And against Bournemouth, the problems are very clear from the opening minute, but they soon regrouped and obviously fought back. But that's a very much a concern, I think, with how Newcastle play, and especially the impact of the crowd on a Sunday afternoon. I think that's very much something that Newcastle can thrive upon, and if not, and take it and run away with them. It's something that Liverpool are wary of. It's something that Klopp mentioned in his press conference this morning. That Newcastle very much are a force now, and that the crowd are very much going to be there to be that 12th man.
Well, I was going to ask about that, because obviously there is a bit of a rivalry now between the two clubs. As we mentioned there, Klopp has certainly wound up Newcastle supporters, and Eddie, and to a degree as well, Eddie Howe. I'm just thinking, his comments last season, is it a sign of just how well Newcastle have disrupted that established order, do you think?
Possibly, you could argue that. I think there's an element of frustration from Klopp as well with the comments, because obviously Liverpool have sort of been in, or the perception has been Liverpool have been in around that big six, the European elite, on a shoestring budget, and obviously there's arguments to suggest that's very much not the case with the millions that have been spent from Liverpool. But I think it's difficult with Newcastle coming into the riches, isn't it? The fact there could be, with Liverpool maybe not strengthening as stringently as possible as they have done, they sort of left them open to these gaps, which has caused the problems and subsequently missing out on Champions League football last season. And obviously when you've got the likes of PSG, Manchester City and Real Madrid, and then Newcastle sort of join that elite group now. So I don't think jealousy is the word, but I think there's an element of envy given Liverpool's situation that you sort of getting, especially you've seen the evidence this summer with Romeo Lavia and Moises Caicedo both choosing Chelsea over Liverpool. There's maybe a slight bit of grumbles of the fact that Liverpool maybe haven't been backed in the sense for Jurgen Klopp. That's very much the fan opinion, at least, where the owners are coming in for criticism because they're not maybe they're cautious to spend, and obviously when you're not proactively signing players and it's more reactive, that's when you become an overspend and become susceptible to this criticism.
It's interesting though, because you mentioned Casino there, and obviously Liverpool had a bit accepted. He's chosen Chelsea, and it's really interesting when you mentioned their kind of owners' reluctance to spend, and people say, well, we're there. Liverpool were about to spend a British record fee on Casado. So clearly there's money there to be spent. I think that's maybe something that also just angers maybe not just Newcastle fans, but supporters of clubs up and down the country, is that sometimes Klopp can play the kind of poverty card, and then all of a sudden, if the deal's there to be made, there's money to be spent, and a lot of money, i.e. the 110 plus million on Casado.
It's difficult, and I think the owners have sort of showed a hand there, but I think you've sort of got to take into account the money that has been received this summer, and obviously the outlay of wages from the likes of Firmino, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Naby Keita, and whoever else is left. But it's hard with Liverpool because you don't really know the face of it. I think Jurgen Klopp's took the role of sort of fronting the criticism, and that's why he's quick to sort of not make excuses, so to speak, but maybe he's got a reason for why that's happened. But it's hard because obviously the owners, FSG, are very much the face of the criticism at the minute, and Klopp has worked unbelievably well to sort of get Liverpool to where they are from when he took over in 2015. So there's an element there, but I think it's hard to sort of, I can understand the frustrations of fans, especially from Newcastle fans, with the comments he's made, but it's hard to sort of comment on it. So I don't really want to put my foot in it too much.
Yeah, I guess again, from looking from the outside, and he's very good at the distraction tactic, and when things aren't going well, he's one of those managers that's quick to say something that maybe distracts from, if they've lost a game or if things aren't going too well. And that is a really good sign of a good manager in many ways, when you can take the criticism away from your players and kind of get the headlines written about something else. And he is very good at that. And we mentioned the fact, obviously, Liverpool haven't got Champions League football and there is a rebuilding job. I guess if the Champions League came as a surprise for Newcastle, for Eddie Howe and the owners and the fans, it certainly came as a surprise for Liverpool. And you couple that with their kind of drop in form. I know that they finished the season quite well, but overall, obviously, the season didn't go as planned. They were kind of caught off guard, I guess, with how quickly Newcastle have risen into that top four.
Yeah, and I think when one club drops out, there's obviously very much room for another club, and it happened with Chelsea, obviously, as well. Liverpool and Chelsea were at one point on Super Sunday battling out, or maybe it's Saturday morning, battling out for the 10th place. But it's credit to what Eddie Howe's done, really, isn't it? The fact that when you get this newfound riches, I think you've seen where people, especially when I've played Football Manager, you sort of just go for the highest earning players and splash the cash. And he's been very, very cautious with it. And obviously it's worked, because you don't want to bring in too many big earners, too many high profile signings, because it ruins the cohesion of the squad. But it's like, I think Newcastle caught us all by surprise, but I don't think in a surprise where they wasn't going to get European football. I think that was very much on the agenda from last season, that Europa League football or Conference League football at least was the thing. But I think it comes to a point now where Liverpool are very much on the back foot in this sense. Not saying Liverpool are underdogs, but I think it's definitely a lot more evenly matched than what it was under maybe Steve Bruce a couple of years ago.
Yeah, most certainly. And we've talking a bit about the rivalry. I mean, the touchline is going to be a really interesting watch, isn't it? On Sunday, it was last week, Klopp was asked about the new rules where you can only have one member of staff within the touchline. He mentioned it would be a problem for only one club, Newcastle. I was a bit jovial about that, but it was a reference. And we know how the game at Anfield last season ended. I mean, that was a wee bit feisty. And there really does seem to be this kind of undercurrent of feistiness between the two dugouts. And it's going to be a really intriguing battle on that touchline on Sunday.
Yeah, I wasn't born at the time, but it's the shades of the 90s, late 90s sort of encounters, isn't it? Where it was very much end to end, it's hustle and bustle. And obviously last season, the fallout at Anfield was was clear to see. The rivalries there, I think rivalries in any league are good. Liverpool and Newcastle, I think Newcastle have always not been a sleeping giant as such, but from whenever I've sort of watched football, Newcastle have always been up there. I grew up watching the Sunderland derbies as well. Obviously, you don't have many of them anymore with them meandering in mid-table in the Championship. But no, it's just, it's good to see. I think it's not good to see now being a Liverpool writer, because you're not sure you're going to get the win there, because especially last season, I've gone into a thing and Newcastle aren't going to be pushovers, and even more so this season. I think the pushover tag is very much gone now. Liverpool are still a big club in the Premier League, but I don't think like you said, I don't think it's at all. You're not going to fear Liverpool by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I think that makes such a big difference, because you remove last season, the seasons before that, Liverpool visitors, and you were going expecting to get beat essentially. And when it was the likes of Steve Bruce, even Rafa Benitez to a certain degree, you knew the best they were maybe aiming for was a point, and if you end up getting beaten, you weren't beaten by 3 or 4-0. It was often seen as a bonus. Whereas now Eddie Howe wants to win every game. He's not happy unless Newcastle United pick up all 3 points. And when that kind of comes into the crowd, into the terraces, you can't underestimate what a big difference that makes to the players, because I fully believe the players feel that. And I think Sunday you will just feel this kind of real sense of optimism and positivity from the crowd at St James's Park, and that will boost the players going into the actual game and what happens on the pitch. I just want to talk a bit about how Liverpool will approach the game on Sunday. And firstly, just talk and just get your view on the red card that was overturned, the Alexis McAllister red card. I mean, how big of a boost for Liverpool is that?
Oh, it's massive. It's I think with Liverpool, the midfield options are already limited. Obviously, we have the likes of Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott there, but they're not really players you can call upon them. But I don't think they're not the players you spend 45 million on. Especially with the lack of the defensive midfielder, or the number 6 is what it's called now. That was the position McAllister was playing. So without him in that position, especially, and without obviously with Tari Wendo, who's now came in, it's a massive boost, because now he can sort of maybe unleash the shackles a bit with McAllister, because he's played that deeper role, and he hasn't done himself a disservice whatsoever. You haven't looked at him to go, oh, he's not cut out for that. He's very much capable of playing it, but for the player and the profile that Liverpool wanted, he's very much someone that should be slightly wider in the midfield three. But the red card, I think, it is slightly higher to red card. You got no complaints. I just think the main gripe with Liverpool fans has been how it's been handled, especially going to VAR, and there's certain accusations being thrown around about the match officials. But it's one of them things where Liverpool sort of needs that boost, and I think, given how much of a dysfunctional midfield it has been in the opening 2 games, I think it's the right decision and a good boost. And I think going into the game, having that midfield base now, it's positive. But then obviously we'll probably touch upon it in a few minutes. The injury or doubt for Ibrahim Konate throws a spanner in the works of the whole system again now.
Yeah, I was going to just on the midfield. Obviously, they've signed Endo, haven't they? Do you see him coming in and starting? And as you say, McAllister might push out wide, and I'm just wondering who drops out in that case. Or do you see it being the midfield 3 that started against Bournemouth?
I hope not. I don't think that. I don't think it's worked. It's worked in certain aspects, but I just think you're asking of Gakpo, he's capable of playing there, but he's not an out-and-out midfielder. I just find McAllister restricted in that deeper role. He's obviously one who likes to break the lines and push forward the ball. And him and Dominic Szoboszlai, they both work hand in hand, and Szoboszlai's shown great glimpses of it already. I think there's been certain reports in local media, at least, that the move for Wataru Endo is very much not a squad role player now. He's going to be more or less thrown into it as and when he's ready. But he's shown glimpses that he can play there on Saturday against Bournemouth, but it's hard to sort of get a real judgment of a player getting thrown in on his debut 2 days after signing, given Liverpool are down to 10 men and got 20 to 30 minutes of defender with a man disadvantage.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting, because when I looked at the team for Bournemouth, I was slightly surprised to see the midfield 3 that it was. Like you say, Gakpo, for me, I would never have picked him to play there. McAllister, as you say, in deeper role. I just never came in my head that's where he'd be playing until I actually properly looked at it. So it's going to be interesting to see the team sheet on Sunday, because again, and we've said this quite a few times. Well, the previous 2 episodes of The View from the Opposition, that the midfield battle is probably going to be key. The last game out, Man City got the better of Newcastle against Villa. Newcastle got the better of on Villa, and it all stemmed from the dominance in midfield of Joelinton, Bruno, and Tonali. Now Newcastle have been boosted by the news that Joelinton is okay. Eddie Howe confirmed that in his press conference this morning. Hasn't trained in the earlier part of the week, but he's back now, and Eddie Howe said fingers crossed he'll be okay for Sunday. So that usually means he will be. So it's going to be a really interesting battle in the middle. The defence I'm really interested in though, Stephen, because again, looking from the outside in, they look very vulnerable at the back. I mean, the first 20 minutes or so against Bournemouth, they looked all at sea. Alisson rushing out, Van Dijk, and not looking their usual self. Is that the case, or was that just kind of a bad first 20 minutes or so, but actually Liverpool are quite strong at the back?
No, that's very much the crux of it. Liverpool aren't as strong as what they want to be at the back. I said on another podcast recently that when you say the first name on a team sheet, I think for opposition it's the name of the first weakness of Liverpool, and it is the defence. Obviously, we'll touch upon the problem area at the minute, which is the right back, but I think a lot's been made about Van Dijk and his drop off. And against Bournemouth, he showed, obviously, he's now the captain of the club, and he extinguished the fires at least. But I think he struggles with those attackers running from deep, as opposed to maybe likes of Kiefer Moore. Maybe if Isak's playing man-to-man, it might be slightly easier for Van Dijk to defend. But there's also, especially with the midfield that Newcastle have got now, it's very much could capitalise on Liverpool's misdemeanours in defence. But with their midfield third-man runners, I think obviously you got the likes of Joelinton and Guimaraes and Longstaff now. Liverpool central pair, obviously, at least against Chelsea, they were getting caught with those midfield runners sort of stuck in between whether to go or stay. I think when Liverpool are like that, or at least Liverpool are forced to weather attacks, that's at least where Newcastle can definitely threaten Liverpool. But in transition on countering, I think with Trent Alexander-Arnold's new hybrid role, where he's going in between right back to central midfield, if Liverpool are as shoddy in midfield as they have been in recent games, and I think it's very much another area that Newcastle can exploit, because you see Alexander-Arnold's getting caught in between in two mans, and it obviously a lot's made of his defensive capabilities anyway over the recent seasons. And it's just that space in behind on the attacking left. It's Liverpool's very much problem here. If they lose possession in maybe the defensive phase for Newcastle, if you quickly switch it over to that left side, Liverpool are going to be caught, and it's only going to drag out a defender into that space. So onto the point about the defence, very much it is shaky. It's very much a concern. The conversation is on now, will Konate be fit, and should Liverpool sign a new defender? Maybe not focus on midfield anymore after signing 4 midfielders, or 3 midfielders, sorry. But you've got it in one there, mate. The defence is very much the problem.
And when Newcastle play well with their high press, they tend to start the game really quickly out of the blocks. I mean, I would look back at that Spurs game last season when they absolutely thumped them. And I know Spurs were awful that day. I'm not expecting that from Liverpool at all, although I'm hopeful, wishing, but I'm not expecting it. But the fact that Newcastle do like to start the game very quickly, very fast, if Liverpool start the game as they did against Bournemouth, that's surely bad news for Liverpool, isn't it? And that's something Newcastle can exploit.
Yeah, definitely. I think even that Spurs will cause everyone by surprise. And I think if Liverpool start as they did against Bournemouth, you're going to see a repeat of that, and it's going to be damaging for Liverpool's confidence. It's going to be damaging from a moral standpoint as a fan as well. But it depends really. I think attack seems to be the best form of defence for Liverpool. People are sort of discussing how it's gone back to maybe how when Jurgen Klopp first took over, and Liverpool were sort of, it was either getting edged out in a 7-goal thriller, or they were blowing teams away. And I think like I said earlier about the games in the 90s where it was rip roaring end to end, I think Sunday's going to be exactly the same. Liverpool very much a team in transition, and I think while there's areas of improvement in midfield, the attack is the best form of defence.
Yeah, I think there's going to be goals. I mean, I said to my wife, asked us what I thought the score was going to be on Sunday. And I said 4-2 to Newcastle, because Newcastle can't seem to keep clean sheets anymore, despite how well they were doing last season. I mean, they conceded, I think, the same amount of goals as Man City did, which is fantastic. But the latter half of last season, they shipped quite a few goals. They really need to start keeping clean sheets again, but I can't see it happening on Sunday. I think it will be end-to-end. I just think everything's set up really nicely for a really good game. And our listeners will be sick of me saying it yet again, because I've said it the past 2 episodes, but I think it's a really good game for the neutral as well. I think if you're not a fan of Newcastle Liverpool, you will really enjoy watching this game, because I don't think either can defend as well as they should be, but both definitely have threats going forward. I'm just wondering how Liverpool will deal with Liverpool's high press, because again, if Newcastle are on a form, it's their high press, which is really, really good, and they will force opposition defenses into mistakes, especially defenses that like to try and pass it out. And really, the only side that have managed to kind of counter it is probably Man City. What are we expecting Liverpool to do on Sunday with regards to the high press?
I think going into Liverpool on the back of Man City is probably the perfect example. It's not going to be the blueprint, because I think Liverpool, or most teams in the Premier League, are following Manchester City's blueprint. But I think you're seeing where they're getting the splitting the defenders and bringing the fullbacks into midfield. I think that's very much what Liverpool are going to do. The conversation is, should they move away from this system? But I think it's probably too far gone in that respect. It's the system's very much coming in for criticism, but Liverpool are unbeaten in 12 games, I think, or 12 or 13 games, I think it is, in that system. And I think when it works, it looks fantastic. Obviously, you go from back to front, going through the lines. And I think when Liverpool do that, it's sensational, the same as any team doing it. But we've seen on Saturday against Bournemouth, if you play out from the back and Trent Alexander-Arnold takes a poor touch, you're going to capitalise on it. It's going to end in a goal. So if Newcastle are on form and very much on the front foot, I think Liverpool are going to have a difficult task. But in the same respects, if Liverpool do it well and they lay Newcastle in, then it's very much going to be Liverpool's attackers who are going to be reaping the rewards, whether they put it in the back of the net. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, I think it's very much it's like you said, it's going to be unbelievable for a neutral, but it's going to be 2 forms of attack in football. I think the only form of defender we're going to see is when one's on the attack and one's being forced to weather it. But yeah, I think in terms of your question on the high press, I think Liverpool is going to try and play through the line, split them, play through the gaps, and then utilise the likes of Luis Diaz and Mohamed Salah. But the question is, who's going to start in that number 9? I personally do Núñez, because he's got a good record against Newcastle, obviously, and then he's chaotic and he can sort of he can just counteract that back line if he's pushed too high up.
Yeah. He's got a bit of spice about him as well, doesn't he? He can be a bit feisty. But long as Nick Pope doesn't get sent off on Sunday, I think Newcastle will probably have the better of it. I mean, if you're a Newcastle fan, you're listening to this, which of course you are, you've tuned into a Newcastle United podcast, you'll be feeling really optimistic, I think, listening to this episode about Sunday, because Stephen's kind of painted, maybe unintentionally, a bit of a gloomy picture about Liverpool. So I'm going to ask you about their main strength, because there is a main strength. What is it that Eddie Howe will be looking to deal with? What is the one thing that he really has to try and get his team to stop if he's looking at Liverpool's main strength?
Well, I think it's obviously got to be the attack. It's difficult to sort of pick out any other strengths apart from the attack, because it very much is the attack is the best form of defence. Liverpool, and we've seen against Chelsea where Liverpool are just that into the wide areas and flicking it into the middle. It's eye catching and it's almost too quick to stop. But I think that's what Liverpool's few strengths is. Obviously set pieces. I think Newcastle's strength very much plays into that, and they could weather that. But against Bournemouth, Liverpool were very dangerous from set pieces, and obviously the 3-1 scoreline paints a bit of a different picture to what the complexion of the game was. But we've seen Van Dijk hit the bar. And Liverpool were in general very dangerous, and they have been throughout pre-season and the early stages of this season. They've been very, very dangerous from the set pieces, but you just got to take the chances. But the attack and transition, like you mentioned, if Newcastle are pressing high, I think Liverpool are quickly going to look to sort of move through those lines and in around it very quickly. And it's, if you're caught cold or if you're slightly out of position, Liverpool will look to pounce on it. I think the two new boys, Szoboszlai and McAllister, touch upon Szoboszlai because I think Newcastle fans want to hear what he's been like because it's almost the case of what could have been. I don't think it's hard to endear yourself to fans. I think Newcastle fans are a lot like Liverpool. We've known the similarities between the pair, but I don't think you can endear yourself as quickly as what Szoboszlai did on Saturday. I think he's just so combative. He runs. He'll run through brick walls. I think he'll run for 90 minutes, 180 minutes anywhere after that. And McAllister's obviously shown us glimpses from that deeper role, but I think if Liverpool deploy him in that wider position, still in midfield three, I just think it takes the shackles off and unlocks a completely different player. I think with them too, and maybe that sort of linchpin in Enzo in midfield. I think you're going to be seeing maybe a different Liverpool because it very much is a new Liverpool under Jurgen Klopp. Like I said, you're going back 5 or 6 years where you don't know what to expect, and obviously the sense of doom and gloom that I'm sure the Payton may be leading a false sense of security, but I'm probably the biggest pessimist you'll ever meet with Liverpool. But I just think with the new boys especially, I think it's one to be wary of. If you're looking at the midfield three, the attacking three, and that's as far as you go, I think you'd be wrong to it. I think you'd be surprised with what Szoboszlai can bring.
Yeah, I mean, Newcastle United looked at him, they liked him, didn't end up going for him in the end. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does on Sunday. And I mean, you've mentioned there a host of players. My next question was going to be about Liverpool's star man, the one man Newcastle need to keep quiet. Who are you tipping for that?
I'm going to be difficult. There's no one man, I don't think. I think when you put out one fire, there's going to be another one coming up behind. Obviously, Mohamed Salah is the obvious one. He's a magic man, really, isn't he? He can pull someone out the hat. But I think one that we've sort of seen glimpses of is Luis Diaz. He's very much shone in pre-season. And there's obviously a lot of conversation last season about whether Sadio Mane could be replaced. And I think if you catch Luis Diaz on a good day, and if he's good on Sunday, you'll be like, what's all this about with Sadio Mane? I think if you want one more player other than Salah, Luis Diaz is very much that man. He's just electric. He's very much the front foot. He's flamboyant. He's got that South American flair, which I think Newcastle fans are more aware of with their glittering talents over the last few years.
I love watching Diaz. I think he's an absolutely fantastic player. I mean, the goal he scored against Bournemouth was brilliant. He's just a fantastic player. I mean, what a signing he has been in. He's only going to get better as well. I just hope he has a terrible game on Sunday. We've mentioned, I think, what you think Liverpool's biggest weakness is, and that is at the back. So we'll brush over that one. I just want to ask you if there's a certain Newcastle United player that you think Jurgen Klopp will be particularly wary of.
You think Isak, he's obviously got his debut goal against Liverpool, but I think especially in modern football, especially with Newcastle's quality, you'd be wrong to single out one player. But given, obviously, we brushed up on it there with the defensive culpability, I think Newcastle, any of the attacking players, any of the midfield three, even Dan Burn and Sven Botman, I think anyone like that can cause Liverpool problems. I think even from wide areas, the two fullbacks, given the chance creation that probably Liverpool have conceded, especially in the last few months, I think one or at least 2 to 10 or 2 to 11. Sorry, I think they're going to be the players that Liverpool should worry about. So I'm sorry, I've got to be partisan with that, but I think Liverpool will be wrong to focus on one man.
Yeah, and again, it's really refreshing that I could ask any Newcastle United fan to say who is Newcastle's main threat, and you would probably struggle to get the same answer, because there's so many different players that you could pick now, and that's just a sign of how far Newcastle United have come. Whereas at one time it's Alan St-Maximin, and that was always the answer. Whereas now you could pick Almiron, Bruno, Tonali, Isak. There's so many options. Anthony Gordon is another one someone might pick. And then you mentioned there at the back, I mean, Botman had a tremendous game against Man City, kept Haaland very, very quiet. It's going to be a very intriguing game on Sunday to see how he does up against whoever Liverpool might pick as that number 9. But, Nick Pope is another one. I know he got sent off against Liverpool, but he was tremendous last season as a whole. Really just nice to be able to pick one of several Newcastle players as their main threat. All that remains to be done then, Stephen, is to get your prediction for Sunday. I've said Newcastle are going to win 4-2. How do you see the game going?
I said 3-1 on another podcast, but the closer we get, the more nervous I get. I think Liverpool, I think 3-2. It's going to be, I think Liverpool may get caught cold at the start, but I think probably towards the middle part of the first half and at least the second half to come into their own. But just on that, actually, I thought I've sort of been on top of the Newcastle stuff. I've seen Bruno had a bit of a moment on Twitter this week. Would you sort of see that? Obviously, it's a perfect opportunity to not silence the fans, but at least sort of show them this is who I am, this is what I'm about. Do you think that will give him a bit of extra incentive on Sunday?
It was a really interesting response to a question. I think Eddie Howe spoke about it today, and he said it's kind of a lesson to be learned, and he's a very emotional player, is Bruno. I mean, the reaction to the City defeat has split the fan base, and it's been a really interesting week when you read people's different opinions. I mean, on Bruno, listeners to this podcast will know I think he has dropped off to what we've come to expect. You know, I thought he had a decent game against Manchester City. I don't think he's been his usual self, though. So I don't think it's unfair to point that out. But, you know, a lot of fans have jumped on that tweet. I mean, the tweet was a bit of a bizarre one, to be fair, trying to single out players for the defeat to Manchester City, when in reality, I don't think Newcastle played badly. Players didn't play badly individually. They just didn't play at their best. And I think there's a big difference there. But look, it's professional football, isn't it? And, you know, there's certain players that if they looked on social media, they would find a heck of a lot of criticism coming their way. And Bruno is one of those who usually doesn't get criticised at all. In terms of it being the motivation, I don't think he'll need any extra motivation. I think he'll know in his heart of hearts that he's not been at the level that he knows he can be at. But because he set such a high standard that when maybe his form does drop, maybe a bit like Van Dijk to a certain extent, it's maybe a little bit more noticeable. But no, I think, look, Twitter is just a very interesting place, and it's maybe not a fair representation of what actually happens on the streets and in the terraces. I think Bruno will just get better as the season goes on. He's had that injury. He needs to... I don't know if he's fully recovered from the injury he had last season. I think that's maybe why his form isn't as high as we've come to expect from him. But as I say there, it's only because he's set such high standards that maybe it's more noticeable. But yeah, always a fun time on Twitter when it comes to Newcastle United. It's a very interesting watch when it comes to the Newcastle fan base on social media. It can be fun, it can be not so fun. And this week's been very entertaining, to say the least. Lots of ups and downs, but hopefully come Sunday at about 6:15, 6:30, it's all fun and games for Newcastle United fans on social media, celebrating a win against Liverpool. Stephen, thank you very much for popping on to the Everything is Black and White podcast. A pleasure to have you on, explain the insight into Newcastle's visitors on Sunday, Liverpool. To you guys watching, please hit that subscribe button on YouTube, give the video a thumbs up, and to you guys listening on the podcast, where it'll come exclusively first on the podcast, as always, the view from the opposition, give us a rating and review. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news, including live coverage of Newcastle versus Liverpool through our dedicated live blog. And I'll see you very soon.